Millionaire CEO sees groom fleeing wedding and makes shocking decision, leaving all guests stunned. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Melody Wood stood in the narrow hallway outside the sanctuary of St. Michael's Church, trying to still her trembling hands. Her heart pounded in a rhythm of cautious excitement, and she kept reminding herself that all these jitters would soon give way to a day of celebration. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, illuminating the polished floors and antique pews with shards of blue, red, and gold. Over 100 guests waited inside, murmuring softly as the organist played a gentle prelude. The perfume of fresh lilies hung in the air, mingling with the faint scent of polished wood. She brushed a stray strand of her dark brown hair away from her forehead. Her stylist had pinned most of her hair into a simple chignon, but a few curling wisps escaped, framing her face. Melody had chosen a classic ivory gown, demure but elegant, befitting the historic setting of Charleston, South Carolina. Everything was poised to fulfill the vision her parents, particularly her mother, Eleanor, had encouraged: a proper, timeless ceremony that would mark the next logical step in Melody's life. Yet something felt off. Despite the carefully orchestrated wedding details, Melody couldn't shake an underlying restlessness that had surfaced in the weeks leading up to today. She tried to bury those doubts by reminding herself of how she'd spent countless hours ensuring she met everyone's expectations: her parents, her fiancé Mark's, and even some of Charleston's more traditional social circles. After all, she had her dream job as a pediatric occupational therapist at MUSC Shawn Jenkins Children's Hospital, helping children regain motor skills and confidence. Professionally, she was fulfilled, devoting herself wholeheartedly to each patient who needed her gentle approach. It made sense that her personal life would mirror that stability. Her best friend Chloe, a local barista and artist with a flair for the unexpected, peeked around the corner and winked. "You okay?" she mouthed, giving Melody a supportive thumbs up. Dressed in a knee-length coral dress that clashed slightly with her vibrant red hair, Chloe offered a bright presence in the otherwise hushed atmosphere. Melody simply nodded, not trusting her own voice to convey calm. She glanced at the antique clock on the wall. Mark was late, only by a few minutes, yet the slight tardiness made every second feel heavier. The wedding coordinator paced nearby, pressing her phone to her ear, apparently trying to reach him. With each unanswered ring, Melody's stomach tensed. The organist began a new piece, more upbeat but somehow ominous in Melody's ears. From within the church, guests shuffled, exchanging uncertain whispers that carried through the half-open doors. Her father, Arthur, stuck his head around the corner and gave her a concerned look, gesturing that he wanted to speak with her. Eleanor hovered just behind him, her lips pressed together. Melody's breath caught in her throat when she saw their expressions, a cloud of anxiety crossing both their faces. She stepped aside with them for a moment. "Dad?" she asked quietly. "What is it?" Arthur forced a reassuring smile, though worry creased the corners of his eyes. "I'm sure it's just traffic, sweetheart. Mark will be here any second," he said, but his voice wavered slightly. Eleanor nodded, standing so rigidly that the beads on her pale blue dress glinted under the light. Chloe appeared beside them, wearing an uncharacteristically solemn expression. "Should I call him again?" she whispered, flipping her phone in her hand. The wedding coordinator approached, indicating that attempts to reach Mark's cell were still going to voicemail. Melody felt her pulse throb in her ears. She turned her head to peer into the sanctuary. Rows of expectant faces, flowers meticulously arranged along the aisle, a sense of history etched into every beam and window. She'd pictured this moment so many times, imagining Mark waiting at the altar with a soft smile, maybe looking a little nervous himself, but definitely there. Instead, she was alone in the corridor, realizing how utterly vulnerable she felt. A hush fell over the church music, causing a few guests to crane their necks and glance back. Melody swallowed hard. The antique clock chimed the hour, each tone echoing like a countdown in her mind. The gulf of silence between those chimes seemed to magnify an unspoken fear. What if Mark really wasn't coming? She clutched her bouquet as if it were a lifeline. Through the door's opening, she glimpsed Chloe, giving her a small nod, but Melody's composure was fraying, and the hope in her chest flickered beneath the growing pressure. Instead of stepping onto the aisle in celebration, she stood trapped in a silent standoff with time, unsure of what might happen next. Melody's lungs felt starved for air. In the hushed interior of the church, a collective uncertainty settled over the guests. She finally stepped forward with measured calm, guided by Chloe's gentle push on her shoulder. With her wedding gown's train rustling against the floor, she made her way to the front row, where her parents waited. Each step brought an almost deafening echo in her ears. Eleanor's eyes shone with apprehension. "No word yet," she whispered, casting a glance at the half-empty spot where Mark's groomsmen had lined up. One of the groomsmen, pale-faced, stood near the altar, phone in hand. The others exchanged worried looks. "Where could he be?" Melody managed, her voice hardly above a breath. She clutched her bouquet so tightly that the ribbons bit into her palms. She considered every possibility: car trouble, a sudden emergency, even an extreme case of cold feet. As the minutes crawled by, though, the final notion grew more plausible. The wedding coordinator gingerly approached, her expression stricken. "Melody, I just spoke with one of Mark's friends. He left. He called from his car to say he couldn't go through with it." The words clanged in Melody's mind. Left. Couldn't go through with it. Her heart seized, a burning sting chasing away her breath. Is he coming back? She heard herself ask that question before she could process what it meant. Her voice came out raw and trembling. The coordinator's eyes darted away. "I don't think so. I'm sorry." A wave of murmurs passed among the front row guests who overheard. Melody felt Chloe's hand grip her elbow. For a moment, time suspended in the swirl of confusion and disbelief. Then, as if triggered by a collective realization, the subdued chatter in the church began to intensify, people rising from pews, uncertain about whether to leave or wait. "Melody," Arthur murmured, stepping closer to shield her. He slipped a protective arm around her shoulders. "We'll handle this quietly. Perhaps we can speak outside." She nodded numbly, hardly aware of her legs moving. Chloe guided her through the side aisle, away from the main doors where too many onlookers could see. Her mother followed, pressing a hand to her chest as though warding off a fainting spell. Reaching the lobby, Melody slowed. The stained glass windows cast scattered colors on the tiles, and she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a glass pane. Her lips trembled, and tears welled at the edges of her carefully applied makeup. The primal need to escape this mortifying spectacle made her glance toward the exit, yet she also felt an inexplicable anchor of shame, rooting her to the spot as if she should apologize to the guests for the fiasco. Chloe crouched beside Melody, gently tugging at the bouquet. "We can leave right now if you want," she murmured. "You don't have to face anyone." Eleanor's voice, low but urgent, broke in. "Maybe we can salvage this. Talk to Mark's family, find out what's going on, or maybe arrange a private conversation with him later." Melody's head whipped up. "Mom, he ran out on our wedding. That's not just having doubts. That's humiliating." Her voice cracked at the last word, tears finally spilling. "He's not here." Outside, a few curious guests had started drifting onto the church steps, peering in through the doors. Melody could practically feel their stares, their pity, and the brewing gossip that would soon spread through Charleston's tight-knit social circles. A burning mixture of anger and mortification rose in her throat, threatening to choke her. Just then, a groomsman approached, Mark's cousin, perhaps. He cleared his throat, his face pale. "Mark called me from the highway. He says he's sorry. He just couldn't do it. He asked me to tell everyone to go home." Melody watched him shuffle uncomfortably, lacking the courage to meet her gaze. She felt the final blow fall, every last shred of hope disintegrating. The wedding was over, except it hadn't even begun. Tears blurring her vision, she let Chloe steer her to a side corridor. The quiet space offered no comfort, only the echo of Mark's absence pounding in her head. She was left with the staggering realization that her well-ordered plans, the dreams of building a life with Mark, were gone. And now she stood, the missing groom, haunting each step she took, with no idea how to reclaim her dignity, or what was left of it. Clutching the doorframe of the church corridor for balance, Melody felt a jolt of panic ripple through her body. She wanted to vanish, to bolt from the building before anyone else forced her to relive the embarrassment. Her mind was a frenzy of half-formed thoughts. Should she gather the guests, announce something, or let them wander away in confusion? Should she call Mark, confront him, beg him for an explanation? She closed her eyes, heat flooding her cheeks. Then, like a hand extended into darkness, a low, measured voice broke through the murmur of anxious relatives and curious onlookers. "I'm sorry for intruding, Ms. Wood, but it looks like you could use a moment away from all this." Melody turned to see Ryan Collins, a tall, composed man in a tailored charcoal suit. She recognized him vaguely as an acquaintance of Mark's business contacts. She recalled overhearing Mark mention a partnership with a successful tech firm from Atlanta. Something about big investments. Now, that passing connection seemed surreal. This stranger was part of a life that had just evaporated. Her immediate reaction was to withdraw. She hardly knew him, and the last thing she wanted was pity from more people. But Ryan's calm grey eyes held no hint of condescension, only quiet concern. He extended his arm, a formal gesture that felt oddly chivalrous in the midst of utter chaos. "I can take you outside, maybe to a quieter spot," he offered gently. "No one should have to endure this kind of spectacle." Chloe glanced between them, measuring Ryan's sincerity, then gave Melody a nod. "It might help," she whispered in Melody's ear. A faint flicker of desperation seized Melody. She didn't want to face a barrage of stunned friends or, worse, people snapping photos of the jilted bride. She placed her hand lightly on Ryan's arm, uncertain if she could trust her own footing, let alone this man's motives. But with each step, the suffocating tension in the church receded behind them. They slipped through a side entrance, down a short flight of steps, and onto a quiet cobblestone path. Damp with the morning's humidity, the walkway glistened in Charleston's summer sun. Melody felt the dampness of tears on her cheeks, but the fresh air revived her slightly. "Thank you," she managed, her voice catching. "You didn't have to help me." She was torn between shame and relief. Having a near stranger see her in a wedding dress, abandoned at the altar, felt surreal. Yet in the swirl of confusion, Ryan's unruffled presence was oddly comforting. He led her toward a wrought-iron gate opening onto a small courtyard behind the Charleston Library Society. The thick foliage overhead offered a canopy of shade, broken by shafts of sunlight. The hush of this corner was a stark contrast to the turmoil just around the block. Ryan let go of her arm once they were inside. She wrapped her free arm around her waist, suddenly conscious of how extravagant her gown looked against the quiet backdrop. "I'm sorry," she murmured, realizing how bizarre the moment must be for him. "You must think I don't know what you think." His expression softened, a sympathetic crease forming between his eyebrows. I think you're someone who just got left in the worst possible way. That's all. My presence here is just coincidental. I was invited because of some partnership talks with Mark's firm. I don't know him that well, honestly. But seeing what just happened..." He paused, perhaps searching for words that wouldn't patronize her. "No one deserves this, Melody." The sincerity in his tone stirred fresh tears, but she fought them back. "It's humiliating," she whispered. She rubbed the back of her neck, wishing she could evaporate. Ryan stepped closer, his voice low. "Look, I don't have easy answers, but I do know you don't owe anyone an explanation right now. You can decide how to handle this, on your own terms." Something inside Melody cracked, releasing a flood of pent-up despair. She pulled in a shaky breath, locking eyes with the man who'd just become her unexpected ally. Maybe it was temporary, a fleeting kindness. Yet in that small, leafy courtyard, his steady reassurance was exactly what she needed. A single, solid thing to cling to when the ground had just fallen from under her feet. Seated on a stone bench in the library courtyard, Melody tried to compose herself. She could hear subdued conversation drifting from the street, where guests were likely still whispering about the bride left behind. Her phone vibrated for the 20th time, but she couldn't face answering it yet. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the screen, a woman in a white dress with smudged mascara and a heartbreak she wasn't sure how to handle. Ryan lingered a few feet away, giving her space. She appreciated he wasn't pushing for details. The weight of everything churned in her mind. Mark's disappearance, her parents' frantic phone calls, and an unavoidable realization that the life she had planned might no longer exist. Outside the confines of her professional world, she felt lost. She started, swallowing hard. "I don't even know where to go." He moved a step closer, posture careful. "You could go home, but I imagine your apartment might feel overwhelming right now. Or you could stay with your parents for a while." She twisted the ring on her finger, an engagement band that felt heavier with each second. "My parents will want me to salvage something. They'll insist I talk to Mark, or at least figure out a graceful story to tell. I'm not sure if I can handle their questions or suggestions right now." Ryan nodded slowly, crossing his arms. "Sometimes stepping away helps. Just for a bit. Until you can gather your thoughts. Do you have a friend you'd feel comfortable staying with?" "Chloe," Melody replied. "She lives downtown, near the coffee shop she works at. She's always told me I could crash there if I needed a break." It felt odd to talk about practical escape strategies in a wedding gown, but the embroidered bodice and train were reminders of a ceremony that never happened. Ryan glanced at her phone, still buzzing with calls. "Do you want me to drive you somewhere, or at least walk you to a cab? I'm sure the last thing you need is to be swarmed by curious eyes." She hesitated, scanning his expression. "You've already done a lot, and you barely know me." He managed a faint, kind smile. "That doesn't really matter, does it? I saw someone in pain, so I offered help. That's it." A lump formed in Melody's throat. She wrestled with the conflict between pride and desperation. The last thing she wanted was to appear helpless, but the idea of braving the street alone in a ruined wedding dress felt unbearable. "All right," she agreed quietly. "If you could help me get to Chloe's place, I'd be grateful." They left the courtyard, slipping through side streets to avoid the main entrance of St. Michael's. A few onlookers spotted them anyway, wide-eyed at the sight of a bride departing on foot with a stranger. Melody's cheeks burned, but she pressed forward, clinging to Ryan's steady presence. Outside a bustling row of historic buildings, Ryan managed to hail a passing ride service. He opened the door for her. "You'll be okay?" he asked softly, leaning down to meet her gaze. "If you need anything, I'll be in town for a few days, business meetings and all. You can reach out." She nodded, voice trembling. "Thank you." "Ryan." He closed the car door, and she stared at him through the window for a moment before the driver pulled away. The reality set in. She was fleeing her own wedding. No cheerful newlywed send-off, no honeymoon departure. Just an escape from heartbreak and shame. Chloe's place was about 5 minutes away, but time seemed suspended. Melody's eyes traced the passing streets of Charleston, live oaks draped with Spanish moss, pastel row houses, and the faint shimmer of the harbor in the distance. She'd grown up here, built her career here, and almost tied her life to mark under these venerable old rooftops. Now the city felt like a labyrinth of questions she couldn't answer. When the driver stopped, Melody spotted Chloe waiting on the sidewalk, anxiety etched on her face. Melody's chest constricted. She realized this was only the beginning of her new reality. As she stepped out onto the curb, she let out a shaky breath, feeling both relieved and terrified. The altar she had planned to walk down was miles behind her now, and there was no turning back. Chloe's studio apartment was cluttered with half-finished paintings, random sketches, and the tantalizing aroma of freshly ground coffee. Melody stood near the door, still in her ivory gown, dazed by the incongruity of the setting. Here she was, clutching a wilted bridal bouquet, while Chloe shoved aside brushes and canvases to clear a seat. The place felt like a refuge, chaotic yet comforting. "Sit," Chloe insisted, guiding Melody toward an old sofa. "You must be exhausted." Melody sat heavily, the gown fanning around her. Tears threatened to return, but she swallowed them back. She'd already cried enough for one day. She watched Chloe dash to the kitchen counter and pour a cup of steaming coffee, adding just enough cream to create a velvety swirl on top. "Here," Chloe said softly, pressing the mug into Melody's hands. "Sip. Breathe. You're safe here." Melody nodded in thanks. As she took a tentative drink, the warmth spread through her. Outside the window, the late afternoon light streamed into the apartment, illuminating dust motes floating like specks of gold. She let her shoulders relax a fraction, beginning to grasp that she was finally out of the public eye. Her phone still vibrated intermittently. She glanced at the screen, calls and texts from her mother, a few from Mark's relatives, several from co-workers who had heard something was amiss. The idea of responding made her stomach turn. Chloe lowered herself onto a wooden stool across from the sofa. "You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. Not right now." Melody exhaled shakily. "My parents probably want me to come home, or at least face them and explain why." This happened. She gestured to her dress, as if it were a relic from another life. "But I can't deal with it tonight. I can't." "Then don't," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "Give yourself permission to just not. You're an adult, Mel. They can't force you. Mark chose to leave you there. You get to decide what happens next." The finality of Chloe's words made Melody shiver. What did happen next? For years, she had carefully followed the steps that seemed to define a stable life: earn her degree, secure a respectable position helping pediatric patients, date a man from a respectable family, plan a respectable wedding. Now that the final piece had crumbled, she found herself frighteningly unmoored. Staring at a painting of abstract flowers pinned to the wall, Melody began recalling her old hobby of photography, the quiet hours she used to spend capturing Charleston's hidden corners. She'd given it up to focus on her job and Mark, setting aside the camera she once loved. Why had she been so quick to dismiss that part of her life? Her phone buzzed again. She muted it, letting silence settle around them. Chloe, sensing Melody's internal swirl of emotions, scooted onto the sofa and wrapped an arm around her. "You're free now," she said gently, voice barely above a whisper. "Free from pleasing Mark or your parents or anyone else. This is your chance to figure out what you really want, not what's expected." Melody's throat tightened, but her tears no longer felt like pure grief. For the first time since she'd found herself alone in that church corridor, she recognized an unexpected glimmer of relief. With Mark gone, so too was the weight of fulfilling everyone else's plan. That thought both scared and exhilarated her. She placed the mug down, carefully stood, and stepped out of the wedding gown. Chloe found a spare t-shirt and sweatpants, which Melody slipped on with trembling relief. Peeling off the layers of satin was like shedding a false skin. She exhaled a shaky breath, brushing her hand through her freed hair. "I'm not going back to my parents' house tonight," she murmured. "I need space. I need—" Her voice trailed off. Chloe pressed her hands gently. "You need to rediscover yourself, Mel. Take your time. I'm here." Outside, the Charleston skyline glowed with the final rays of dusk. The city was the same, but for Melody, everything had changed in a single day. She glanced toward the window, feeling the stirrings of a small, unfamiliar hope. Maybe this unexpected rupture was an invitation to truly live, on her own terms, for the first time in her life. 3 days after the wedding fiasco, Melody found herself in Chloe's living room, surrounded by half-emptied boxes of wedding favors and carefully wrapped gifts that now needed returning. Each box felt like a small funeral for the future she'd planned, a future that had evaporated in one humiliating afternoon. She clutched a letter opener, slicing through packing tape and forcing herself to confront the contents inside. Fine china sets, personalized glassware, embroidered hand towels, everything symbolized a life she was supposed to share with Mark. A tightness built in her throat whenever she encountered a gift card containing cheerful messages of best wishes for the couple. She hated returning these tokens. Yet, the alternative, keeping them, felt too painful. At her side, Chloe scribbled addresses onto shipping labels, occasionally muttering under her breath about how unfair all of it was. "Remember," Chloe said, smoothing a label onto a large box, "you're the one who got abandoned. You shouldn't have to be the one fixing this mess." Melody tried to form a half-smile but failed. She set the letter opener aside and massaged her temples. "It's the last thing I feel like doing, but I can't just let these gifts gather dust or force Mark to handle it. My mother would have a fit if I ignored etiquette." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Etiquette is for people who haven't been publicly humiliated. Still, I get it." "This is your way of taking control, I suppose." Melody nodded. Each sealed package felt like a step forward, however small. She glanced around Chloe's cluttered apartment, paint-spattered tarps on the floor, art supplies piled on the dining table, and the persistent aroma of coffee grounds and acrylic paint. Though chaotic, it felt more welcoming than her own meticulously decorated condo ever had. She'd spent the past few nights on Chloe's pull-out sofa, drifting to sleep amid half-finished canvases and the comforting hum of the city just outside. Since the day she fled the church, messages and calls had poured in from co-workers, neighbors, and distant acquaintances. Some offered sympathy, others brimmed with curiosity veiled under concern. Melody was learning how small Charleston could feel when scandal took center stage. She'd done her best to ignore it all, letting each unanswered ring remind her she wasn't ready to discuss what had happened. A firm knock at the door made both women freeze. Melody exchanged a tense look with Chloe. Lately, every knock or ring brought the possibility of more unwanted drama. Chloe stood and approached the door cautiously. To their relief, it was only a courier delivering yet another package, an order of blank canvases for Chloe's next project. After shutting the door, Chloe laid the canvases against the wall, shaking her head at the never-ending deliveries. "You know," Chloe said, returning to the table stacked with boxes, "I've been thinking maybe it's time you got back to your normal routine, like going to work. Hiding here with me is fun and all, but you love your job. It might help distract you." Melody fidgeted with a piece of packing tape stuck to her fingertip. "I've thought about it. But I'm dreading the looks and the whispers. Those kids at the hospital adore you," Chloe reminded her gently. "They couldn't care less about gossip. Your colleagues, well, they might talk behind your back for a bit, but it'll die down. Maybe focusing on your patients again will ground you." She knew Chloe was right. Crawling under the covers each morning felt tempting, but that wouldn't heal the wound. In the last few days, she'd hardly checked on her patients or the hospital updates. Feeling guilty for her absence, she took a breath and reached for her phone. Dozens of missed calls. But her immediate focus landed on a simple text from Dr. Bennett, her supervisor at MUSC Shawn Jenkins Children's Hospital. "Just checking in. Hope you're all right. Let me know if you need time." Time. Wasn't that what everyone said she needed? Time to get over the betrayal. Time to rediscover herself. Time to let the gossip fade. But staying idle only deepened her sense of vulnerability. She realized she craved the structure her job provided and the genuine sense of purpose it gave her. "Okay," she said quietly, meeting Chloe's eyes. "I'll go in tomorrow. We'll ship the rest of these gifts tonight, and tomorrow I face everyone." Chloe smiled, a rare, gentle grin. "Good. Embrace the storm, Mel. It's the only way you'll come out stronger on the other side." Melody pulled into the hospital parking lot early, hoping to slip inside before too many co-workers arrived. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of nerves and anticipation. She had chosen a comfortable pair of navy blue scrubs, an outfit that felt reassuringly familiar. Gone was the glamorous bridal gown. She was back in her professional armor, ready to assist kids in reclaiming mobility and independence. As she walked through the lobby of MUSC Shawn Jenkins Children's Hospital, she received a few double takes from colleagues who obviously recognized her. Yet she kept her gaze forward, heading straight for the pediatric occupational therapy wing. She reminded herself that the children, her real priority, wouldn't ask awkward questions or gossip. They would just be happy to see a familiar, supportive face. Her workspace, a bright and colorful therapy room, beckoned. Shelves filled with puzzles, therapy balls, and adapted toys lined the walls. A rainbow rug covered the center floor, where she often sat with younger patients to work on coordination and fine motor skills. Stepping over that threshold felt like coming home. For a moment, she forgot the swirling scandal that had consumed her personal life. "Melody!" A fellow therapist, Karen, popped her head out of a supply closet. "Hey, it's good to see you." Her tone was warm, but Melody spotted the flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "I'm okay," Melody replied quickly, putting on a small smile. "Just needed a few days off." Karen nodded without pressing further, as if sensing that prodding would do more harm than good. "We have a morning session soon with Maddie. She's been asking for you." Maddie was a vivacious 5-year-old, recovering from a surgery to correct a birth defect in her arm. She'd been making steady progress under Melody's care, and her cheerful energy always boosted Melody's spirits. Grateful for the distraction, Melody headed to prepare her therapy station. 15 minutes later, Maddie bounced into the room with her mother trailing behind. Her bright eyes lit up the moment she spotted Melody. "Miss Melody, you're back," she exclaimed, hugging her uninjured side around Melody's waist. The child's wide grin was genuine proof that not everyone would judge or pity her. "Hey, Maddie," Melody said softly. "I missed you too." Within minutes, they were immersed in finger-painting exercises designed to strengthen Maddie's grip. They giggled together when bright colors smeared across the table. For that half hour, the outside world disappeared, replaced by the simple joy of helping a child reclaim her abilities. However, once Maddie left, a hint of tension returned to the air. One by one, staff members stopped by. A passing nurse with a sympathetic smile, a social worker who gently inquired if Melody needed support, and even Dr. Bennett himself. He paused in the hallway, arms crossed, and lowered his voice. "You sure you're all right to be here?" he asked, a fatherly concern evident in his gaze. Melody mustered a reassuring nod. "I am being here." "Helps," she hesitated, then added, "Thank you for understanding." He gave a kind grunt. "You're one of our best. Take it slow if you need to." By midday, Melody was exhausted, though not entirely from work. Navigating the undercurrent of pity proved draining. She found refuge in an empty break room, sipping water as she stared out a window at the Charleston harbor. Sunlight gleamed off distant waves, reminding her of possibilities, of the city's gentle pull. She thought about how Mark had once insisted on a lavish honeymoon in the Bahamas, while she'd quietly longed for a simpler trip, maybe upstate, somewhere mountainous like Asheville. Had she ever truly voiced that desire? Caught in her musing, she jumped when her phone vibrated. It was her mother. No surprise, she let it go to voicemail. Then, as if on cue, a text appeared. "Mom says come home. We can deal with everything together." Melody closed her eyes. She knew her parents wanted to shield her from further shame, but surrendering herself to their plan felt like stepping backward. Exhaling, she returned to the therapy room. Another patient would arrive soon, and for those brief sessions, she could forget the drama and focus on healing. If she could help these children discover new strengths, maybe she could find her own way to heal too. Later that week, Melody trudged into Kudu coffee and craft beer after work, the sweet, rich aroma of roasted beans enveloping her. She clutched a stack of hospital paperwork and nodded politely at a few familiar faces, determined to avoid small talk. Chloe was behind the counter, steaming milk with smooth expertise. The cafe buzzed with local college students tapping on laptops and a steady hum of conversation. As Melody approached the bar, Chloe grinned in that mischievous way she had. "Mocha latte, extra chocolate drizzle?" she teased, referencing Melody's usual pick-me-up drink. "Please," Melody replied, letting the tension of the day drain from her shoulders. She dropped her paperwork on a nearby table, deciding she would finish it after a quick mental break. Chloe slid the latte across the counter. "By the way," she said nonchalantly, "Ryan called." Melody nearly choked on her first sip. "Ryan? Collins?" "Yep. The fancy CEO with the good hair," Chloe answered, leaning forward. "He stopped by earlier looking for you. Said he'll be in town for a bit." Melody felt a flutter in her stomach, recalling his quiet confidence the day of the non-wedding. She hadn't expected him to reach out again, though she'd thought about his kindness more times than she cared to admit. Did he leave a message? Chloe nodded, handing over a small napkin with a scribbled phone number and a note. "Coffee. Ryan." Melody's pulse quickened. The straightforwardness of his invitation stirred both curiosity and caution. She wasn't sure how she felt about seeing him again. Her emotions were still a tangled mess, and the specter of Mark lingered in every corner of her thoughts. "Are you going to call him?" Chloe pressed. Eyebrows lifted. Melody tucked the napkin into her bag. "I don't know, maybe." The day Mark fled the altar, Ryan had been her lifeline out of humiliation. She wasn't sure if they were meant to remain casual acquaintances, or if something more could develop, but the idea of connecting again was both comforting and terrifying. She lingered at the cafe for a while, sipping the mocha latte and organizing patient notes. Now and then, customers recognized her, offering sympathetic nods. The echoes of being that poor bride still resonated around town, though most people refrained from outright questioning her. Maybe they sensed she'd had enough prying for one lifetime. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi, Melody, it's Ryan. Chloe gave me your cell. Sorry if that's too forward. I'm in Charleston a few more days for meetings, coffee tomorrow." Her heart thudded. She stared at the screen, scanning his words like they might dissolve if she blinked. Though she dreaded more public scrutiny, she realized she also felt a flicker of genuine excitement. Ryan had treated her with respect during her worst moment. Perhaps meeting him for coffee would offer a chance to talk openly, outside the swirl of drama. She typed back a brief message. "Hi, Ryan. I'd like that. Let me know the time and place." Then she quickly locked her phone and exhaled. It felt like stepping onto a new stage before she'd fully rehearsed. That evening, after dinner at Chloe's apartment, leftover pasta and random bits from the fridge, Melody gathered her courage and texted Ryan again, confirming a time. They decided on tomorrow afternoon at Kudu, a space she knew well. The location gave her a sense of comfort and control. Lying in bed later, Melody found herself anticipating their conversation. She told herself they were just two acquaintances, nothing more. Still, an undercurrent of hope tugged at her chest. Maybe it was the possibility of forging a new connection that wasn't defined by heartbreak or other people's expectations. For the first time since the wedding fiasco, she drifted to sleep without replaying Mark's betrayal in her mind. Instead, she pictured a quiet table at Kudu Coffee, 2 cups steaming, and a conversation that might open a path towards something meaningful, whatever shape that might take. Mid-afternoon sunlight poured through the broad windows of Kudu Coffee, casting warm rectangles of light on the polished floor. Melody had secured a small table near a wall decorated with local artwork. Her knee bounced under the table as she waited for Ryan, a nervous energy coursing through her. She glanced at the people passing outside, tourists with shopping bags, locals walking dogs, the swirl of downtown Charleston life. When Ryan stepped through the door, a polite smile lit his features. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, exuding a quiet confidence. Catching sight of Melody, he raised a hand in greeting, then navigated the tables until he reached her. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, setting his phone aside and taking a seat opposite her. "I know things have been chaotic." Melody forced a small laugh. "Chaotic is an understatement. But I'm glad you reached out." She gestured toward the counter. "Would you like something?" He nodded, and Melody rose to place their order, a cold brew for him, a cappuccino for herself. As she waited for the drinks, she realized how unusual this scenario was. Just days ago, they'd barely known each other, and now he was the one person who'd witnessed her lowest point without judging. When she returned, Ryan accepted his cold brew with a grateful nod. "How are you holding up?" She considered deflecting the question, but something in his calm gaze made her want to be honest. "Some days are easier than others," she admitted. "Returning to work has helped. I focus on the kids instead of the gossip. But sometimes I still feel like I don't know, in the middle of a public sideshow." His expression softened. "I understand. I've had my share of messy personal moments becoming public, especially during my divorce a few years back. Nothing quite like this," he added quickly, "but I do know how it feels when your life is under a microscope." Melody leaned forward, curious yet cautious. "Mark mentioned you were divorced, but he didn't share many details." Ryan shrugged lightly. "It was a bad breakup. We married young, grew apart once I started my tech firm. She felt I neglected her. Maybe I did. By the time we realized it, too much damage was done." He paused, swirling his cold brew. "Anyway, I'm not eager to repeat that kind of heartbreak, but I'm also not swearing off companionship. Life is complicated." His candidness offered Melody a flicker of reassurance. Perhaps they both carried scars, his from divorce, hers from a nearly wedding that imploded. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, sipping their drinks as the cafe's chatter floated around them. Eventually, Melody cleared her throat. "Thank you again for helping me that day. I don't think I ever properly said how grateful I am. You gave me a way out." He waved a hand. I just did what anyone with an ounce of compassion should have done. But if it made a difference, I'm glad. A faint smile tugged at his lips. I'll be in Charleston for a couple more days. We're finalizing a partnership with Mark's former firm. Awkward timing, I know, but business sometimes moves independently of personal drama. She bit her lip. I hope you don't feel stuck in the middle of all that. Mark's not exactly on my contact list anymore. I have no idea what he's doing now. Ryan hesitated. I had a brief conference call with him yesterday. Honestly, I tried keeping it strictly professional. He sounded not great. Apologetic, I guess. A swirl of mixed emotions knotted in Melody's gut. Apologetic was a far cry from the damage he'd caused. Yet hearing that he regretted his actions brought her no relief. Instead, she felt more certain she needed to reclaim her own direction, free from Mark's shadow. Ryan set his cup down. If you ever need an outside perspective, or just a friend who isn't tangled in Charleston's social circles, I'm willing to lend an ear. No pressure. Melody felt a soft warmth spread through her chest. He offered friendship in a genuine way, unburdened by pity or obligation. Outside, a breeze ruffled the cafe's awning, carrying the promise of change. Melody inhaled, letting that promise settle in. Perhaps it was time she opened herself to new possibilities, even if it started with a simple conversation over coffee. The next few days blurred in a mix of patient sessions, late-night conversations with Chloe, and fleeting messages from Ryan. They'd begun texting occasionally, short notes about their days, humorous observations about Charleston's quirky festivals, and the occasional meme that made Melody laugh unexpectedly. The blossoming camaraderie felt easy, unlike the stifling dynamic she'd grown used to with Mark. That sense of newfound calm was shattered one Tuesday evening when Melody's phone rang with an unknown number. At first, she assumed it might be a telemarketer, but something prompted her to pick up. "Hello," she said, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder. She was in the midst of sorting new therapy supplies for the hospital. "Melody, hi, it's Mark's mother, Beth Sterling." The woman's voice was pinched, like she'd practiced this call a few times in her head. Melody froze, nearly dropping the stack of coloring books she'd been holding. Mark's mother had always been polite, if a bit formal. She took a moment to compose herself, then answered, "Mrs. Sterling." "Hello." A weighted pause followed, filled with mutual discomfort. "I'm sure this is unexpected," Beth finally said, "but I wanted to check on you. We haven't spoken since." "Well, the day of the wedding that never was." The dryness in Melody's throat made it hard to speak. "It's unexpected, yes. I'm not sure what you want me to say." Beth sighed audibly. "I realize my son's actions were inexcusable. Running off, leaving you there. We never approved of how he handled it." Her tone held a faint tremor, perhaps regret or embarrassment. "Mark is back in Charleston, you know. He's been staying at our family home. He's not himself. I think he's struggling with guilt." Melody's jaw tightened. She still felt the ache of public humiliation every time someone brought up the wedding. Why was Beth calling her now? She tried to keep her composure. "I'm sorry he's struggling, Mrs. Sterling, but I'm not sure what you expect from me. He abandoned me. My entire life was turned upside down." Beth inhaled sharply. "I know. I'm not making excuses for him. It's just, Mark says he wants to see you, to apologize properly. He's been avoiding everyone else, but he keeps mentioning that he owes you an explanation." A rush of conflicting emotions welled up. Anger, sadness, confusion. Did she owe Mark a chance to speak face to face, or was it merely an attempt on his part to ease his own conscience? Her heart pounded. Even imagining Mark's face brought back the swirl of heartbreak she'd struggled to contain. I appreciate you letting me know, Melody said, her voice shaky, but that's not a simple request. Beth's voice softened. I understand. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see him again. But should you change your mind, you can call me. I'll make sure it happens quietly, without more drama. Melody closed her eyes. The last thing she wanted was another scandal. Thank you, she managed. I'll think about it. They exchanged a few more stiff words before ending the call. Melody set her phone down on the coffee table, exhaling a ragged breath. After the mental progress she thought she'd made, moving forward, bonding with Ryan, rediscovering bits of her old self, why did Mark's family have to drag her back into that mess? Eventually, she gathered her purse and left Chloe's apartment, heading to her own condo for the night. She unlocked the door to the quiet living room, where boxes of wedding decor remained stacked along the walls. She'd barely been here since the day Mark vanished from the altar. Even so, she felt compelled to face this space, to reclaim it somehow. But a single thought kept intruding. Should she speak to Mark? Giving him the time of day might risk reopening the wound, yet not talking might leave questions unanswered, feeding her doubts. She sat on the sofa, flipping her phone in her hands, uncertain. A text from Ryan pinged, "Hope you're having a good night. Busy day here, but thinking of grabbing coffee tomorrow. Interested?" Melody stared at the words, relief washing over her. For now, she could at least focus on what was healthy and supportive. She typed back a quick yes, feeling the knot in her chest loosen slightly. Whatever Mark wanted, she wasn't ready to decide yet. Meanwhile, she had the promise of coffee with Ryan, a gentle reminder that healing could still happen on her own terms. Melody stood in her living room, gazing at the half-packed boxes of wedding decorations she had abandoned weeks ago. The condo smelled slightly stale from disuse, its silence pressing against her. She hadn't slept well, the phone call from Mark's mother replaying in her mind, stirring conflicts she'd hoped to shelve. She wondered if she'd ever truly escape the shadow of that unfinished wedding. A beep from her phone interrupted the stillness. She checked the screen. Ryan Collins. A small swell of relief replaced the anxious knot in her stomach as she read his text. "In town again. Will you join me at the Gibbs Museum Gala this weekend? I'd love your company. No pressure if it's too public." She hesitated, rereading his invitation. The Gibbs Museum of Art annual gala was a high-profile event, typically filled with Charleston's elite. Under normal circumstances, she would have declined, wary of scrutiny, yet she felt an odd pull toward accepting. Perhaps facing these social circles would help her reclaim her dignity. She typed back a tentative yes before her courage failed, then promptly sank onto her sofa, heart pounding. Later that afternoon, Melody headed to Chloe's cafe, wanting to talk it through. She found her friend restocking shelves of local pottery mugs. When Chloe saw Melody's tense expression, she set aside her task and motioned for Melody to follow her to the back room. "You look rattled," Chloe observed, crossing her arms. "What's up?" Melody chewed her lip, then told her about Ryan's invitation to the gala and her impulsive decision to say yes. "It might be too soon," she confessed, "but a part of me wants to show people I can still go out in public without shame. And She paused, a light flush coloring her cheeks. "I like talking to him." Chloe considered this, tapping her foot on the worn floor. "Look, you're not obligated to hide forever. Ryan clearly respects you. Going out with him doesn't make you some scandal magnet. It makes you someone who refuses to let Mark's actions define your life." Melody sighed, relief washing over her. "It's still scary. People will see me and think, 'Oh, that's the bride who got abandoned.'" Chloe shrugged. "They might think that. But do you really care anymore?" She arched an eyebrow, then gave Melody's arm a reassuring squeeze. If you're feeling it, do it. The next few days flew by. Between therapy sessions at the hospital and preparations for the gala, Melody barely had time to dwell on Mark's mother's call. She did receive a second voicemail from Beth, gently urging her to meet Mark, but Melody still needed time. Dealing with him right now felt like inviting a tornado into her fragile calm. Finally, Saturday arrived. A balmy evening in Charleston, warm breezes drifting off the harbor. Melody slipped into a seafoam green cocktail dress that Chloe had helped her pick out. Its clean lines contrasted with the frills of the ill-fated wedding gown, and she felt unexpectedly confident when she saw her reflection in the mirror. Ryan picked her up at the entrance to her building, stepping out of a black car with an easy smile. "You look incredible," he said, opening the door for her. She caught a whiff of his subtle cologne as she slid into the passenger seat. Her nerves spiked when they reached the Gibbies Museum, where a small crowd mingled on the front steps, the soft glow of chandeliers spilling through tall windows. Ryan offered his arm, and she took it, heart hammering as they walked inside. The main hall was filled with Charleston's socialites, local business owners, and art patrons. The hum of polite conversation mixed with the strains of a chamber orchestra. White-clothed tables displayed auction items, while servers floated past with trays of champagne. Melody squared her shoulders, conscious that tonight was her first major appearance since the debacle at St. Michael's Church. Ryan guided her gently through the crowd, introducing her to colleagues from Atlanta and Charleston. Although a few curious glances landed on her, Melody mustered a calm smile, reminding herself that this was her life to reclaim. She refused to let whispers define her, and with Ryan at her side, supportive, poised, she felt a stirring of hope that perhaps the last chapter of her story was finally closing, making room for a new one to begin. The lobby of the Gibbies Museum dazzled with gilded frames, elegant floral arrangements, and the soft murmurs of Charleston's well-heeled. As Melody and Ryan mingled, she was acutely aware of people casting discreet glances their way. Despite the prickle of self-consciousness, she forced herself to hold her head high. This was a different stage, a chance to rewrite her narrative. A few acquaintances approached them. One was a woman Melody recognized from past social gatherings, her pearl necklace catching the light. "Melody," she greeted warmly, though a flicker of curiosity lit her eyes. "Haven't seen you around lately. How have you been?" Melody managed a courteous smile. "I've been busy with work, but I'm good, thanks." The woman's gaze flicked momentarily to Ryan, who returned a polite nod. "Well, it's lovely to see you," she added, "and you look radiant." They moved on, leaving Melody with a faint relief. She knew the question on everyone's lips. Isn't she the bride who got stood up? But no one uttered it openly. Society niceties forbade such directness. Still, she braced herself for prying questions at any moment. Eventually, Ryan steered her toward a quieter part of the gallery, displaying contemporary art. He leaned close to speak over the gentle music. "You doing okay?" She exhaled softly. "Better than I thought. It's easier with you here." Ryan's lips curved into a hint of a smile. "I'm glad. I won't let anyone corner you." She appreciated his tactful blend of protection and respect. Though they were not officially a couple, his actions felt genuine, not forced. He was simply there to stand beside her, allowing her to face these social circles at her own pace. A voice intruded from behind, resonating with an insincere sweetness. Melody Wood, right? They turned to see a sharp-eyed man who wore the practiced grin of someone used to meddling. She recognized him from local society columns, Larry Moore, a freelance journalist known for sensational tidbits. Melody's pulse quickened. Ryan's posture tensed. "Been meaning to chat," Larry said smoothly, adjusting the press badge clipped to his lapel. I'm doing a piece on Charleston's modern entrepreneurs and notable personalities. Heard about your philanthropic work at the Children's Hospital and your sudden personal developments. Care to comment?" Her cheeks flamed. "No, I'm here as a guest to support the museum. I'm not looking to make any personal statements." Larry tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "So you've moved on from poor Mark, I take it. How does one go from abandoned bride to, well, enjoying the company of a new man so quickly?" Melody's stomach churned at his invasive tone. She fumbled for a measured response, but Ryan spoke first, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm sorry, but Miss Wood isn't interested in discussing her private life. If you want a story, write about the art on display." "That's what this event is for." Larry feigned a pout, pen hovering over his notepad. "Just doing my job. The public's curious, you know." Ryan's eyes hardened. "Curious or not, this isn't the place for scandal chasing." Unsettled, Melody swallowed a knot in her throat, remembering how public her humiliation had been. The last thing she wanted was more gossip fueling some tabloid piece. She steeled herself, meeting Larry's gaze with unexpected resolve. "I'd appreciate it if you respected my boundaries," she said simply. Larry paused, clearly disappointed that neither of them gave a dramatic soundbite. At last, he shrugged. "Suit yourselves," he muttered, stepping away. Exhaling, Melody felt her pulse racing. "Thank you for that," she said to Ryan. "I hate being cornered about Mark." Ryan's tone softened. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, especially not someone hunting for a headline." He gestured to a nearby painting, letting the tension disperse. "Shall we focus on something better, like this vibrant display of color?" With a small smile, Melody nodded. As they strolled the gallery, the tension in her chest loosened. Yes, she was under the spotlight tonight, but she wasn't the same person who'd once worried about Mark's opinion or Charleston's gossip mill. She was standing in her own light, forging a path where her voice mattered more than any rumor. The evening progressed with cocktails, charity auctions, and polite laughter echoing against marble floors. Melody tried to relax, immersing herself in the vibrant energy of the event. Meanwhile, Ryan skillfully introduced her to a few philanthropic leaders and business associates. She caught glimpses of the discreet admiration some attendees directed toward Ryan. Clearly, he had a formidable reputation in both Atlanta and Charleston circles. Just as Melody began to feel more at ease, she spotted Larry Moore lurking near the buffet table. He sipped champagne, eyes scanning the crowd like a vulture. An uneasy feeling twisted in her stomach. She suspected he hadn't given up on stirring drama. Suddenly, as if on cue, Larry sidled up to them again, though this time he wore a theatrical mask of politeness. "Ah, Ryan Collins," he began, inclining his head. "Heard your tech firm made quite a splash on the West Coast. Any big announcements for Charleston?" Ryan remained unflappable. "We're exploring expansions to support local startups," he said coolly. "If that interests you for an article, you can reach out to my public relations team." Larry grinned, turning to Melody. "I'm more intrigued by personal developments, Ms. Wood. Last the city heard, you were expecting to be a blushing bride. Now you're attending high society galas with a well-known CEO. Any comment on whether your ex-fiancé regrets losing you to a bigger fish?" A hush seemed to settle around them, as if the air pressure shifted. Melody inhaled sharply, aware that nearby guests pretended not to listen, but were clearly eavesdropping. The last thing she wanted was a public confrontation. She could practically feel Ryan's protective energy at her side. But before she could gather her response, Ryan's voice sliced through. "What happened to Melody is her private concern," he said, measured yet commanding. "And since you're so interested, let me make something clear. The one who ran is the one who lost out. Melody deserves respect, not invasive speculation." His tone carried enough authority that conversation around them tapered off and heads turned. Larry blinked, caught off guard. I'm only trying to... Trying to what? Ryan's expression was calm but steely. Generate clicks, turn a woman's heartbreak into cheap gossip. If you want a real story, write about how she's dedicating herself to pediatric occupational therapy, or how she refuses to let a humiliating event define her. That's integrity. Print that, if you're so inclined. A ripple of gasps spread among onlookers. Melody felt her cheeks burn, but not from shame, rather from astonishment at Ryan's public defense. In a single, powerful speech, he'd flipped the narrative, confronting the city's insatiable curiosity head-on. Larry stood there, pen poised in mid-air, looking momentarily rattled. Then, regaining some composure, he cleared his throat. "My apologies if I overstepped. Good evening." Without further snide remarks, he backed away, though Melody doubted he'd dropped the story so easily. As the onlookers murmured, Ryan turned to Melody, gently resting a hand on her arm. "You okay?" he asked softly. Her mind whirled, adrenaline pumping. "I'm fine," she managed, voice trembling. "That was unexpected. You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," he interjected firmly. "You've been through enough." Shaken but touched, Melody glanced around. The gala attendees who'd witnessed the showdown were either whispering in small clusters or offering discreet nods of admiration. For so long, she'd felt defined by what Mark had done. Now, for the first time, someone stood up for her publicly, unapologetically condemning the rumor mill. Impulsively, she reached for Ryan's hand, giving it a light squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered. An unfamiliar surge of gratitude, maybe even affection, coursed through her. His eyes softened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but the music resumed as the next auction announcement began. The moment couldn't last, yet in that flash of time, Melody sensed a profound shift. Ryan's decision to defend her in front of everyone was shocking indeed, especially to her. It wasn't a calculated move, but a genuine act of respect that left everyone stunned, including herself. A few hours after the gala's dramatic scene, Melody slipped into the passenger seat of Ryan's car, her heart still aflutter from his passionate defense. The drive back to her condo was quiet, city lights reflecting off the windshield. When they reached her building, Ryan parked at the curb and offered a small, grateful smile. "I hope tonight wasn't too overwhelming," he said, turning the key to stop the engine. "I didn't mean to stir up a spectacle, but I couldn't stand by while that reporter tried to corner you." Melody mustered a soft laugh, unfastening her seatbelt. "It was intense, yes, but in a strange way I feel liberated, like I don't have to tiptoe around the gossip anymore. It's out there. I survived." He nodded, gaze steady. "Good. You shouldn't have to hide from your own life." She opened the door halfway, hesitant to say goodnight. "Thank you for everything, Ryan." She paused, a sudden torrent of feelings welling in her. A buzz from her phone broke the moment. She pulled it out, expecting an update from Chloe or a message about the event. Instead, the caller ID displayed Mark's name. A tremor went through her. "It's Mark," she said quietly, glancing at Ryan, Ryan's brow furrowed. "Do you want to take it?" Melody's pulse thundered. She recalled Beth's plea that Mark wanted to apologize and the swirl of unresolved emotions that threatened her fragile peace. Maybe I should," she whispered, stepping out of the car for some privacy. She pressed the phone to her ear, pacing a few steps along the sidewalk. "Mark?" she said, forcing her voice not to waver. A shaky exhale sounded on the other end. "Melody, hi." "I'm sorry for calling so late." She said nothing, letting him continue. "Look," he began, voice low, "I know I handled everything terribly. I've been trying to find the courage to talk to you. My mom said she spoke with you, but you didn't want to see me." Melody swallowed. "I'm not sure what there is to say, Mark." A faint cough. I get it. I messed up in the worst possible way. But I can't shake this guilt. I need to see you, just once. Please. Her mind spun, replaying the moment she'd stood alone in that church vestibule. She glanced at Ryan, who waited in the driver's seat, gaze locked on her with quiet concern. Torn between the desire to leave the past behind and the need for closure, she finally spoke. Tomorrow, Waterfront Park, noon. Mark let out a relieved breath. Okay, yes, thank you. I'll be there. She hung up, heart pounding, uncertain if she'd done the right thing. For all her bravado at the gala, confronting Mark face to face felt even more daunting. Taking a moment to steady her breathing, she returned to Ryan's car. He raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? Melody fiddled with the hem of her wrap. He wants to see me tomorrow. Apologize, I guess. A swirl of dread and faint curiosity tightened her chest. I told him I'd meet him. Ryan studied her for a moment. Do you want me to come along? Or is this something you need to do on your own? She sighed. I'm not sure yet, but I think I need to speak to him, if only to get closure. I can't keep running from it. Ryan nodded slowly, though a flicker of worry crossed his features. Just be careful. You've come so far. I don't want him messing with your head. Touched by his concern, Melody leaned in, placing a hand gently on his forearm. I'll be careful. It's just one conversation, right? Then maybe I can let all of it go. They exchanged a lingering look. Then Melody murmured a good night and slipped out of the car. As she stepped into her building's lobby, she couldn't deny the tremor of apprehension rippling through her. Tomorrow, she would confront the man who'd left her on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Whether that confrontation brought peace or more turmoil was anyone's guess. The next day, Charleston's sun shone brightly over Waterfront Park, its fountain spraying arcs of water that sparkled in the midday light. Tourists strolled, snapping pictures of the iconic pineapple fountain. Melody clutched her purse, heart pounding as she scanned the crowd for Mark. She felt a surge of déjà vu. She'd once envisioned coming here as a newlywed for pictures, not for a fraught reunion. Mark appeared by a bench near the water, hands shoved into his pockets. He wore a rumpled polo shirt and khakis, looking thinner and more tired than she remembered. Anxiety flickered across his face as she approached. Melody, he said softly, swallowing hard. His eyes darted around, wary of eavesdroppers. Thanks for agreeing to see me. She crossed her arms, bracing herself for whatever he intended to say. I'm not sure what you want. I'm here because you insisted. He nodded, gaze dropping to the ground. I owe you an explanation, he exhaled. I was overwhelmed. The wedding, the expectations, everything. I panicked, and I know that's not an excuse for running away like a coward. Melody clenched her jaw, recalling the anguish of standing alone in the church. Why couldn't you just tell me? If you had doubts, we should have talked about it beforehand, or at least faced me that day. Disappearing. She paused, voice tight. It was brutal. He flinched. I know. And there's no way to make it right, but I wanted you to know it wasn't about you not being good enough or anything. I just realized I wasn't sure I loved you the way you deserved. My parents, your parents, the city, they all expected us to marry. I let that pressure build until I snapped. 1,000 questions warred in Melody's mind. Anger, grief, and a tiny hint of relief mingled. At least she now heard him admit their relationship wasn't fueled by genuine passion, but by obligation and fear. You humiliated me, she said quietly, voice wavering. I thought I'd done something wrong. No, Mark said, his voice raw. You were always amazing. It's me who has issues. I'm sorry for hurting you, Melody, truly. She studied him. The regret in his eyes seemed genuine. yet a part of her wondered if he also sought to ease his own guilt. She inhaled, letting the crisp breeze off the harbor fill her lungs. "I appreciate your apology, but it doesn't erase the pain." Mark nodded, shoulders sagging. "I understand." They stood there for a moment, a boat horn sounding in the distance. Finally, Melody spoke again, quieter this time. "I don't think I ever really loved you in the right way either. Not deeply. I was ready to settle for a relationship that felt logical. So in some twisted sense, you did me a favor by walking away. But the way you did it..." She trailed off, remembering the swirl of whispers, the stares, the shame. Mark looked away, anguish flickering across his features. "I know. If I could turn back time..." "You can't," Melody cut in, lifting her chin. "But I'm ready to move on, and I hope you will too. If you came here expecting me to take you back or something, that's not happening." He raised his palms in surrender. "No, I just wanted closure, hearing you say you're moving on." "I guess that's all I can hope for." Melody nodded, feeling a small yet profound weight lifting. She didn't hate him, and that realization freed her more than she'd expected. "I forgive you," she said, surprising herself with the words. "Not for your sake, but for mine." Tears glistened in Mark's eyes. He whispered a thank you. Then he turned and walked off along the waterfront, shoulders hunched. Melody stood rooted, letting the moment settle. She felt a trembling mixture of sorrow for what they'd lost and relief that their story was finally over. As she turned away, her phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Thinking of you. Let me know you're okay." The corner of her mouth twitched into a sad, hopeful smile. She was, in fact, okay, maybe even better than okay, because no matter the damage left behind, she could choose to rebuild her life on her own terms. And that thought alone bridged the gap between the world she was leaving behind and the one she hoped to embrace next. Late that same afternoon, Melody drove aimlessly along the scenic route by the Charleston harbor. Windows rolled down, letting the salty breeze whip through her hair. She'd just left Waterfront Park, where she'd finally confronted Mark. Though she felt an odd relief from hearing his apology and offering forgiveness, an undercurrent of turmoil brewed beneath the surface. Questions about her future still loomed. Soon, her phone buzzed with a call from her father. She considered ignoring it, but guilt and love pushed her to answer. "Hey, Dad," she managed, trying to keep her voice even. Arthur Wood's tone was gentle but insistent. "Melody, your mother and I have been worried. We'd like you to come over for dinner tonight. Please, we need to talk about all this." She inhaled, gripping the steering wheel. She knew they meant well, but she dreaded their need for control. Nonetheless, she found herself agreeing. Within half an hour, she was pulling into the driveway of her childhood home, an elegant two-story house with meticulously trimmed hedges and a front porch that once felt safe and warm. Her mother, Eleanor, opened the door before Melody could knock. "There you are," she said, eyes glimmering with worry. "We've been so concerned." "Come in, dear." Melody stepped into the foyer, surrounded by framed family photos and the scent of Eleanor's roast chicken. Nostalgia mingled with a sense of suffocation. This was the environment that had molded her sense of duty and propriety. No matter how old she got, it seemed she couldn't fully escape their expectations. Arthur ushered her into the dining room, where the table was already set. Conversation started politely, but it quickly veered toward Mark. "He told us he wants you to at least think about giving him another chance," Eleanor said softly, hands clasped in her lap. "Maybe not marriage right away, but to rebuild trust." Melody's fork froze midway to her mouth. "He mentioned no such thing to me. He only asked for my forgiveness, and I gave it, but that's all." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Arthur, who cleared his throat. "We know it's complicated, but you two invested so much in each other. Couldn't there be something worth salvaging?" Anger flared in Melody's chest. She pictured Mark's stricken face at Waterfront Park, how he said he'd realized he never loved her the right way. Their entire relationship had been built on convenience and social pressures. She refused to regress for the sake of appearances. "Dad, Mom, I appreciate your concern, but I'm done with Mark. We both know it wasn't truly right." A tense silence fell. Then her mother pressed a hand over her heart, as if physically pained. "We only want you to be secure, dear. We hate seeing you alone in that apartment, dealing with rumors." Melody's pulse hammered. "I'm not alone. I have friends, my work, and—" She hesitated, thinking of Ryan. They weren't official, but he was certainly more than a passing acquaintance, yet she feared letting her parents in on that part of her life, afraid they'd pounce with more scrutiny or disapproval. Arthur exhaled, pushing his plate aside. "You're an adult, Melody. We respect your decisions. But it's hard to watch you face all this gossip without any support." She stared at them, feeling a surge of frustration mixed with gratitude for their love. "I know you want to protect me," she said softly, "but trying to push me back into Mark's life won't fix anything. I need to live on my terms." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Then at least come home for a while. Let us help you manage the fallout." Something in Melody snapped. The idea of moving back felt like surrender. She remembered how isolating it had been to revolve her life around Mark, to meet everyone's expectations. Rising from the table, she steadied herself. "I'm sorry, but that's not what I need." Her father opened his mouth as if to protest, but Melody lifted a hand. "Thank you for dinner. I'm grateful for your concern, but I'm handling this my way." Without waiting for a response, she left the table, retrieved her purse, and walked out. Returning to her car, she sat for a moment, hands shaking. Tears welled up, fueled by conflicting loyalties and unresolved grief. She felt caught in a free fall, her old safety nets gone, her new path uncertain. Yet beneath the fear, a seed of determination sprouted. If she was falling, she'd learn to land on her own feet. The next morning, Melody found herself driving toward Folly Beach, an impulsive decision born from a craving for solitude. As she parked by the dunes, she breathed in the briny air, recalling how she used to come here with her camera, before Mark, before her life was dominated by pleasing others. She swung a small backpack over her shoulder. Inside it, her old camera that she hadn't touched in months. The beach was quieter than usual, the off-season reducing crowds to a few locals and early morning surfers. Warm sunlight kissed her face, offset by a gentle breeze that ruffled her hair. She slipped off her sandals, letting her toes sink into the sand, the cool grains grounding her. Every step forward felt like a release of pressure, a chance to exhale all the tension built up in her chest. At a spot close to the water, she paused and set her backpack on the damp sand. The rhythmic rush of waves soothed her frayed nerves, a natural lullaby reminding her that life ebbed and flowed beyond human drama. Gingerly, she unzipped the bag and lifted out the camera. A tiny flutter of excitement stirred in her belly. She'd forgotten how much she loved capturing moments in still frames. She snapped a few shots of the shoreline, the sunlight reflecting on the crests of waves. Then she turned her lens toward small details. A broken seashell glinting in the wet sand, a lone seagull perched on a rock. Each click felt therapeutic, like reclaiming a fragment of herself she'd lost in the frantic rush of wedding planning and social approval. After half an hour, she found a spot on a weathered wooden breakwater and sat down, hugging the camera to her chest. She tried to recall the last time she had done something purely for her own joy. The memory was hazy, overshadowed by the demands of Mark and her parents, even her demanding career. Yet she felt a quiet certainty blooming. She did love her job, truly. But there was more to her than her work at the hospital and the role of respectable fiancé. Her phone vibrated, breaking into her thoughts. She pulled it from her pocket. Noticing Ryan's name on the screen, a small smile formed. She tapped to answer. "Melody." Ryan's voice carried warmth and a hint of concern. "I was worried. Are you all right?" She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the ocean mingle with his voice. "I'm at Folly Beach," she admitted softly. "Needed space to think." He paused. "Do you want company or do you prefer to be alone?" She considered, glancing at the small group of surfers in the distance. "Company sounds nice." She gave him directions, and he promised to arrive in about half an hour. While waiting, she continued to snap photos, capturing fleeting instants of gentle waves washing over footprints. Each time the shutter clicked, she felt a new surge of self-awareness, a reminder that she had passions and dreams outside the constraints of tradition. It wasn't that she'd hated her old path. She simply realized how much she'd ignored personal desires in the name of pleasing everyone else. When Ryan arrived, he approached quietly, wearing casual jeans and a light jacket. She greeted him with a smile, the camera dangling from its strap. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice softer than usual. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, scanning her expression. "I'm just glad you're okay. You looked shaken after the conversation with your parents." She sighed, standing next to him so they both faced the rolling ocean. "They want me to do what's safe, move back home, or even reconsider, Mark. I can't. I'm done letting them steer my life." Ryan nodded, concern in his eyes. "I understand. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. It's not easy to disappoint family." They lingered there, silent except for the soothing roar of the surf. Melody felt a gentle pressure in her chest, a blend of nervousness and comfort. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time I rediscover the parts of myself I set aside." Ryan's lips quirked into a half smile. "Such as that talented photographer I see behind the lens." She chuckled softly, gazing at the horizon. "Yes, and more. I'm tired of feeling like I'm on the brink of collapse, always reacting to Mark, my parents, or gossip. I want to choose my own path, even if it's scary." Ryan squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Then let's figure out what that path might look like. One step at a time, with the ocean stretching endlessly before them." Melody felt a sense of possibility unfurl in her heart. She couldn't yet see the full shape of her future, but for the first time in a long while, she dared to believe it could be brighter than her past. Early the next morning, Melody awakened with a renewed clarity. The conversation on Folly Beach had stirred a quiet determination within her. She recalled Ryan's supportive words and the calming sound of the waves as she'd contemplated her next move. True freedom, she realized, required tying up loose ends once and for all. So she texted Mark to arrange a final meeting, this time for both of them to speak without emotional upheaval or paternal involvement. She suggested the same waterfront park bench, the place that had become a symbol of their closure. But this conversation was not about reconciling. It was about ensuring he understood there was no going back. She needed him to hear it directly, so there'd be no lingering doubts for either of them. That afternoon, warm sunshine again lit the harbor. Mark appeared wearing the same uncertain look as before, but this time there was acceptance in his expression. Melody felt a calmness that surprised her. She'd cried her tears and found the strength to face him without anger. "Mark," she greeted, standing by the bench with the rippling water behind her. "Thanks for meeting me." He shuffled forward, shoulders tense. "Sure. I wasn't sure if you'd ever want to talk again." She nodded, folding her arms. "Let's be clear, I'm not here to revisit the idea of us. I'm here to end any speculation, for our families, for ourselves." She inhaled, letting her voice stay firm but kind. "I need you to stop suggesting to anyone, especially my parents, that we might get back together. That door is closed." He winced, but nodded. I understand. My mother got ahead of things, telling yours that maybe I wanted to fix it. But the truth is, I know we can't. Not after everything. I don't want to trap you in a half-hearted relationship again. We both deserve better. Relief seeped through her. She appreciated his honesty. Thank you, she said softly. My parents mean well, but they often push me toward what they consider safe. I need them, and you, to understand that I'm forging my own path. Alone, if need be. Mark lowered himself onto the bench, staring at the fountain's dancing jets of water. I'm sorry again for hurting you, but I'm also sorry for how I let our families dictate our relationship. If I'd been braver, I would have admitted my doubts before it came to that wedding day fiasco. Melody exhaled, a final wave of grief swelling, then subsiding. We both made mistakes. I was so focused on meeting expectations, I barely paused to question if we were genuinely happy. That's on me. They shared a moment of silence, a gentle breeze lifting Melody's hair. Then she offered him a small smile of empathy. I do forgive you, but I need to move forward with a clear head. It's best if we don't stay in each other's lives. His eyes glinted with sadness, yet acceptance. I get it. If you ever need anything, though. She shook her head lightly. I'll be fine, Mark. Really? They stood, an unspoken agreement that this was truly the last page of their story. He departed first, weaving through a group of tourists, snapping photos of the pineapple fountain. Melody lingered, absorbing the moment. A sense of liberation coursed through her. The old chain that once bound them, family pressure, social expectation, had finally snapped. Her phone chimed. She glanced at the screen, half expecting her mother again, but it was Chloe. Proud of you. Dinner later. Melody typed a quick reply. Sure, I have news to share. Clutching her purse, she walked away from the fountain with a newfound lightness. In the past, the idea of making her own decisions, especially decisions that disappointed people she loved, terrified her. But as she strolled along the waterfront, the setting sun painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks, she felt something akin to exhilaration at the realization. No one else could dictate her path now. The evening ahead held a promise of more honest conversations, both with Chloe and likely with Ryan. Melody wasn't certain where her relationship with him might lead, but she knew it grew from genuine care, not from scripted obligations. And that simple truth made her heart lift. She was free at last to choose what truly brought her happiness, without guilt, without apology. That night, Melody stopped by Ryan's room at the Dewberry, Charleston, where he often stayed during his business trips. She felt a flutter of nerves as she rode the elevator, conscious that this conversation might change the course of their relationship. Not that they'd labeled anything yet, but a current of mutual affection had been flowing between them ever since that wedding day fiasco. Ryan opened the door, surprise flickering in his grey eyes. Melody, he greeted warmly. I wasn't expecting you. Everything okay? She stepped into the softly lit suite, the warm glow of lamps revealing the understated elegance of the space. I hope I'm not interrupting. I just needed to see you, she admitted, heart thudding. He guided her to the seating area by the window, offering her a bottled water from the mini fridge. She accepted gratefully, then paused to gather her thoughts. I spoke to Mark again, she began, voice steady. I told him it's over for good, that we both need to stop clinging to any possibility of reconciliation. I think it was the final step I needed. Ryan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. How do you feel? Her eyes glossed with emotion. Relieved. And scared, in a strange way. There's no going back now. I'm officially stepping away from the life I used to think was my only path. He reached out, covering her hand with his. Warmth spread across her skin. That takes courage. She met his gaze, noticing the slight furrow of concern. I've been afraid of letting you in, she murmured. Afraid of trusting again, after everything with Mark. But I want to be honest with you. I'm still healing, but I care about you, a lot. Ryan's shoulders eased, as if he'd been holding a breath. Melody, I feel the same. I'm not asking you to rush into anything. I know what heartbreak looks like, how it can make you wary. But I've admired your strength from day one, even when you didn't see it in yourself. Tears pricked at her eyes. The vulnerability of speaking her feelings left her both shaken and filled with possibility. I'm not fully over my fears. There's so much gossip and pressure still swirling around, but being with you, it feels different, like I'm allowed to be me, flaws and all. His expression gentled, and he pulled her into a tender hug. Melody inhaled the clean scent of his shirt, her cheek resting against his chest. The simple contact felt like an anchor, a promise that she didn't have to face life's storms alone. They sat like that for a while, letting the unspoken emotions wrap around them. Eventually, Melody leaned back, wiping at her eyes with an apologetic laugh. Sorry, it's been quite a day. Ryan brushed a hand along her temple, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. No apologies. This is real. I'd rather have these honest moments than any facade. She managed a watery smile. Thank you for letting me take my time, for defending me. She hesitated, heart pounding, for wanting to be part of my life. He responded by drawing her close again, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. They spoke in hushed tones about the near future, Ryan's business commitments, Melody's evolving therapy projects, and the possibility of traveling back and forth between Charleston and Atlanta. The logistics were daunting, but neither seemed discouraged. Instead, they found a spark of excitement in exploring ways to merge their separate worlds without losing their individuality. Later, as Melody prepared to leave, Ryan walked her to the door, reluctance evident in his posture. She paused with her hand on the doorknob, turning back to search his face. Without another word, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips softly against his. The kiss was tentative yet full of promise, a silent agreement that they were ready to explore the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, her cheeks burned, but her heart felt lighter. "Good night, Ryan," she whispered, stepping into the hallway with a mixture of joy and vulnerability swirling in her chest. "Good night, Melody," he replied, voice warm. The door closed gently, leaving her in the quiet corridor. For the first time in forever, she felt both free and deeply connected. It was a fragile balance, but it was hers to nurture, one moment at a time. With Mark truly behind her, Melody poured renewed energy into her work at MUSC Sean Jenkins Children's Hospital. Bolstered by a fresh sense of purpose, she began brainstorming ways to integrate photography into pediatric therapy sessions. The idea stemmed from her own healing process. Snapping photos at Folly Beach had proven cathartic, so she imagined it might uplift her young patients as well. A week after her final conversation with Mark, she scheduled a meeting with Dr. Bennett to propose her concept. In the small hospital conference room, she laid out a series of ideas: simple cameras for the children to use, short photo walks around the pediatric unit, and optional photography projects that encourage fine motor skills and self-expression. Nervous excitement tingled through her as she spoke, wondering if the administration would find her plan too unconventional. Dr. Bennett listened intently, skimming the outlines and budget estimates she'd prepared. Finally, he looked up, a thoughtful gleam in his eyes. "Melody, this is innovative. Combining occupational therapy with creative outlets can be powerful. I see potential benefits for both motor function and emotional well-being. Relief washed over her. So, you're open to trying it? He nodded. Absolutely. We can start small and see how the patients respond. If it goes well, maybe we expand. I'll run it up the chain, but you have my support. Buoyed by his positive reception, Melody left the meeting feeling lighter than air. The rest of her day flew by as she attended to her usual rounds, assisting children relearning to grip utensils or maneuver wheelchairs. Her own burdens felt less heavy now. She was channeling her experiences into something transformative for others. That evening, Ryan arrived in Charleston once again, texting her about grabbing dinner after his business obligations. She chose a casual spot near the waterfront, a place with live music and a laid-back vibe. When he stepped through the door, wearing a crisp shirt and that comforting smile, she felt her heart lift. "So," he began after they found a table, "how'd your meeting go?" She beamed. "Better than I hoped. Doctor." Bennett approved a pilot program for photography-based therapy. "I think it might really help the kids." Ryan leaned in, genuine pride shining in his gaze. "That's incredible, Melody. I'm happy for you." They chatted about the details, and Melody's excitement spilled over. She described how the children might learn to focus a lens, how capturing their surroundings could offer them a sense of control, something often lost during hospital stays. Ryan absorbed every detail, asking clarifying questions. She loved how he took her ideas seriously, never dismissing them as mere whims. Eventually, the conversation shifted to more personal matters. Ryan told her about new developments in his company, potential expansions that would require frequent trips to Charleston. She admitted she was thrilled he might be around more often, though she kept a note of caution. Intercity relationships required coordination and patience, two qualities both of them would need to maintain. A local band started playing, their music a pleasant backdrop. Ryan reached across the table, lightly covering her hand. "I like where this is going," he murmured. "Us, I mean, even with the distance." Melody turned her hand over to lace her fingers with his. "Me too. I haven't felt this hopeful in a long time." He offered a contemplative smile. "I want to support you in any way I can, personal or professional. If that means sponsoring some hospital initiatives or connecting you with resources, just say the word." She blinked, touched by his willingness to help. "I appreciate that, but let's not rush. I need to grow this photography program gradually, with the hospital's blessing. Still, it means a lot that you do that for me." The band's music rose, and for a moment they simply smiled at each other, the din of conversation and clinking glasses fading into the background. Melody realized this was the polar opposite of the tidy life she once pursued. No polished wedding checklist, no forced illusions. Instead, she had an evolving romance rooted in respect and genuine care, a career path that inspired her and the freedom to chart her own course. As the evening wound down, she imagined what might come next. More therapy innovations, deeper bonds with Ryan, and perhaps an eventual reconciliation with her parents on healthier terms. Every step carried risk, but for the first time, those risks felt worth taking. United by mutual understanding, Melody and Ryan walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. Melody parked her car in the hospital garage, feeling a wave of optimism wash over her. Just a few weeks ago, she would have slouched in her seat, bracing for the pitying looks and whispers. Now, she walked through the lobby of MUSC Sean Jenkins Children's Hospital with renewed confidence. The morning light fell through the high windows, illuminating bright posters and colorful artwork on the walls. Employees bustled around in scrubs, clipboards in hand, but Melody no longer felt self-conscious about the wedding scandal or the lingering gossip. She had her head held high. The reason was simple. She had found fresh purpose in her therapy work. Today, she would officially begin her pilot program, Photography as Therapy. There were only a few kids participating at first, but Dr. Bennett had been enthusiastic. She carried a tote bag filled with simple digital cameras, each labeled with a child's name. As she passed by colleagues, she received warm smiles and nods of encouragement. Word had spread that Melody was spearheading something new and creative. At the entrance to the pediatric wing, she spotted Karen, another occupational therapist, waiting for her. "They're all set in the playroom," Karen said brightly, gesturing down the hallway. "The kids are excited to see what you have planned." Melody followed her, heart fluttering with both nerves and excitement. The playroom had been transformed into a makeshift photography station. On a long table, coloring books and therapy tools were pushed aside in favor of a bulletin board where kids could pin photos later. Small posters explained basic photography techniques designed to be kid-friendly. A handful of children, some with wheelchairs, some hooked up to IVs, chattered with anticipation. "Hi, everyone," Melody greeted, setting her tote on a chair. She introduced herself again, mindful that new patients joined every week. "Today, we're going to learn how to take pictures using these little cameras. Then we'll walk around the hospital to capture anything that makes us smile." A boy named Luke, about 10 years old, raised his hand. "We get to keep the pictures," Melody nodded. "Yes, after we print them, you can keep some, and we'll display others on the bulletin board. So, let's figure out how to use these cameras together." She began distributing the cameras, leaning close to each child to show them how to turn the device on and zoom in or out. Luke, whose arm was in a sling from recent surgery, needed an adapted strap to hold the camera more steadily. Another patient, a soft-spoken girl named Sierra, seemed fascinated by the idea of capturing everyday objects in photos. Melody encouraged her to practice focusing on a small stuffed animal placed on the table. As the kids explored their new tools, Melody felt a swell of pride. Here they were, channeling curiosity and play into a form of therapy, developing motor control and confidence at the same time. Karen assisted a child who struggled with the camera buttons, and together they managed a breakthrough as the child snapped a successful photo of his own reflection in a mirror. Soon, Melody led the group on a short photo walk through the pediatric corridors. The laughter and excited chatter echoed in the usually sterile hallways. Nurses paused to smile at the children, some even posing for impromptu pictures. Melody found herself grinning from ear to ear, remembering her own experiences rediscovering photography. How ironic that something she once deemed a mere hobby could now bring empowerment to these young patients. By lunchtime, they returned to the playroom, cameras loaded with snapshots, colorful artwork on walls, goofy selfies, and glimpses of one another's bright smiles. Melody collected the memory cards and promised to print selections for their next session. Many of the children had beaming faces, displaying pride in their accomplishment. Dr. Bennett stopped by, observing the excited atmosphere. He gave Melody a congratulatory nod. "Keep this up," he murmured. "It's already making a difference." As the session wrapped, Melody felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The hospital halls no longer felt like places to hide from whispers. They were spaces for growth and healing for both her patients and herself. Stepping outside into the midday sun, she realized just how much her perspective had changed. No longer tethered to the labels of jilted bride, she was now a determined therapist and an evolving artist. And within that new identity, she felt a freedom more powerful than she ever imagined. That same afternoon, Melody walked along the brick pathways of Charleston City Market, hand in hand with Ryan. Vendors displayed their crafts, woven sweetgrass baskets, homemade pralines, and trinkets capturing the charm of the Low Country. The air smelled of roasted pecans and fresh lemonade, mingling with the distant strains of a street musician's violin. They paused at a stall selling handcrafted soaps shaped like little palmetto trees. Melody picked one up, smiling at its coconut citrus scent. For years, she'd passed through this market with Mark or her parents, always concerned about time or whether an item was useful enough to buy. Now, she indulged in simply enjoying the moment, checking out each booth without any rush. Ryan brushed a thumb over her hand. "You look happy," he observed. "It's nice to see." "I am," she replied earnestly. "The therapy project went great. The kids loved it, and Dr. Bennett was really impressed. It feels good to be accomplishing something meaningful on my own terms." He nodded, guiding her aside so a group of tourists could pass. "I can see that. There's a glow about you, like you're at peace with the present." She let his words sink in. "I think I am, or at least I'm getting there." She felt a pang, recalling how she'd once tied her entire future to marriage. Now she recognized she could thrive by pursuing her passions, whether or not marriage was part of the equation down the line. They strolled further, weaving through the throng of shoppers. Occasionally, someone recognized Melody, but she sensed a shift in the way people looked at her now, less pity in their gaze, more respect for how she'd carried herself through adversity. A few even approached to congratulate her on the new therapy initiative they'd heard about, and Ryan looked on with clear admiration. They paused at another stall where a local artist displayed vivid paintings of Charleston landscapes. One piece showed a sunrise over Folly Beach. Melody's heart fluttered, remembering her own dawn visits to that shoreline with a camera in hand. The painting captured the gentle waves and pastel sky, an image radiating calm. "This is beautiful," she murmured, reaching out to trace a fingertip along the frame. She glanced at the price tag. It was steep, but the piece spoke to her. For a moment, she wondered if she should buy it. Ryan must have sensed her hesitation. "If it inspires you, maybe it's worth it," he said gently. Melody chuckled. The old me would have worried about extravagance, but now, maybe I should embrace what brings me joy. She swallowed, considering the expense. It was more than she usually spent on art, but she felt a deep connection to the scene. "I think I will," she decided, surprising herself. A pleased smile lit Ryan's features. "I'll carry it for you." They completed the purchase, the artist carefully wrapping the painting. Melody held Ryan's hand, stepping away from the stall with a curious mix of excitement and a trace of nervousness. It felt like another step away from her old habits, prioritizing practicality over personal delight. As they left the market, painting in tow, Melody's phone buzzed. She frowned at the screen. It was her mother. She exchanged a glance with Ryan, then answered. "Hi, Mom," she said, attempting a neutral tone. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. "Melody, dear, your father and I have been talking. We realize we pushed you too hard. We want to make amends, if you're open to it." Melody's heart softened. Despite the tension, she missed her parents' warmth. "I'm open to talking," she replied carefully. "But I need you both to respect my choices," Eleanor exhaled. "We promise. We just miss you. Would you come for lunch on Sunday, maybe? No talk of Mark, I swear." Melody's gaze flicked to Ryan. He gave her an encouraging nod. "All right," she told her mom. "Sunday lunch, but on my terms." After hanging up, she felt a curious blend of relief and apprehension. Slowly, it seemed, life was knitting itself back together, a tapestry where she could be honest about her needs. Ryan slid an arm around her waist, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Good step," he murmured. She smiled, leaning into him. "Yeah," she whispered, letting the moment settle. "A really good step." They continued walking, painting in one hand, fingers entwined in the other, fully present in the Charleston sun. Melody knew challenges remained, but she finally felt the freedom to live each day on her own schedule, in her own way. Melody brushed an invisible speck of lint from her blouse as she prepared to enter one of Charleston's outdoor community festivals. Hosted in Marion Square, the event featured local artisans, food trucks, and live music from a small stage at the park's center. Although she'd been to such gatherings many times, this particular afternoon felt different. She was emerging from a personal cocoon, testing how she fit into the social fabric of a city that once defined her by failure. She'd agreed to meet Chloe here. As soon as she approached the main archway, her best friend bounded over, sporting a bright sundress and her familiar fiery hair pulled back in a bandana. "Girl, you look amazing!" Chloe exclaimed, giving Melody a quick hug. "It's so good to see you out and about again." Melody blushed slightly. "Thanks. I guess I'm finally feeling comfortable in crowds, at least, mostly." Together, they wandered between booths offering homemade jams, handcrafted jewelry, and scenic photographs of Charleston's coastal beauty. Melody felt an occasional flutter of recognition, people who attended her ill-fated wedding or knew of it through social channels. But instead of dodging their gazes, she greeted them politely, meeting curious eyes with a confident smile. She was no longer the same woman who'd considered hiding indoors to avoid questions. They passed a local pottery stall, where Melody recognized a woman from her old church congregation. The woman hesitated, then approached with a gentle smile. "Melody, my dear, how are you?" she asked softly. "I haven't seen you at St. Michael's in a while." Melody inhaled. She recalled the sting of standing alone at the altar, yet she maintained a gracious expression. "I'm well, thank you. I've just needed time, but I'm doing much better now." She waited for the pitying undertones, but the woman's eyes held genuine warmth. "It's wonderful to see you happy," the woman said, then patted Melody's arm before moving on. That brief exchange buoyed Melody's spirits. Perhaps not everyone in Charleston was still whispering about her humiliation. Some genuinely cared, wanting only her well-being. She and Chloe found a shaded table near a food truck that sold low-country-style tacos. After ordering, Chloe grinned conspiratorially. "I hear rumors about a certain photographic event at my cafe soon. Want to confirm or deny?" Melody laughed, appreciating her friend's playful tone. "All right, yes. I'm planning a small photo exhibit featuring the pictures the kids took at the hospital, plus a few of mine. It's a way to celebrate their progress and raise awareness for occupational therapy." Chloe's eyes danced with excitement. "That is fantastic. You'll have to show me some of the prints before they go up. We'll make your exhibit the highlight of the cafe for a whole week or longer if people love it." A sense of gratitude washed over Melody. "I'd love that. Thank you for always cheering me on, even when I was too wrapped up in my own mess to see a bigger future." Chloe waved off the praise. "You do the same for me, and I knew you had it in you all along, just needed to break free of your old expectations." They ate their tacos while a local band performed on stage, the upbeat tunes carrying a festive energy across the park. Chloe tapped her foot to the rhythm, while Melody let her gaze roam over the gathered crowd. Families chasing toddlers, college students with camera phones, elderly couples soaking up sunshine. This was her city, full of life and possibility, and she finally felt at home in it again. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. Checking the screen, she saw a message from Ryan. "Long meeting ran late. Wish I could be there at the festival with you. Let's meet for dinner." Melody's heart lifted, warmth spreading through her chest. She sent a quick affirmative reply, a soft smile curving her lips. Setting down her phone, she caught Chloe's knowing smirk. "Ryan, huh?" her friend teased. "You're glowing, Miss Wood." Melody laughed, not even trying to hide her contentment. "We're taking things day by day, but it feels good." She paused, sipping her lemonade. "Actually, everything feels good. Like I'm coming back to my life as it should be, not as I was told it had to be." They clinked their plastic cups in a mock toast. "Here's to that," Chloe declared. "Welcome back, Melody. Charleston's been waiting." With those words, Melody looked around and inhaled the soft breeze, letting the city's celebratory spirit wrap around her. This triumphant return was about more than regaining public presence. It was about re-entering the world on her own terms, a fearless expression of self she'd once thought impossible. A week later, Melody's long-awaited photo exhibit launched at Chloe's cafe. It was a modest display, but the small venue was packed with a surprising crowd of supporters. String lights draped the walls, illuminating dozens of photographs pinned in neat rows, some captured by Melody, featuring Charleston's hidden corners and tranquil marshlands, and others taken by children from the hospital who had bravely agreed to share their creations. Laughter and animated chatter filled the room, mingling with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Melody moved among the guests, greeting them and explaining the inspiration behind the project. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back to showcase a pair of delicate earrings, a gift from Chloe, who insisted she celebrate the moment in style. "This is such a fantastic idea," one woman told Melody, pausing to admire a photo of a bright hospital corridor lined with hand-drawn signs. "It's obvious these kids had so much fun." Melody nodded. They did. And while they were snapping pictures, they were also working on fine motor skills. Most importantly, they started seeing themselves as creators, not just patients. Nearby, Dr. Bennett was engaged in conversation with a small group of hospital donors, pointing out the children's photos that illustrated tangible progress. Melody felt a pang of pride. Her program was truly resonating. She noticed a few parents of the young patients in attendance, many dabbing eyes at the sight of their kids' work displayed for the public. The cafe's interior glowed under soft Edison bulbs, and Chloe flitted behind the counter, providing complimentary coffee samples. More than once, Melody caught sight of her friend, shooting her a thumbs up amid the hustle. She grinned back, silently thanking Chloe for supporting every wild idea she'd ever pitched. Eventually, Melody found Ryan hovering near one of her personal photographs, a moody shot of Folly Beach at dawn. She stepped beside him. "So, what do you think of my sunrise?" she teased gently. He slid an arm around her waist, gazing at the print. "It's beautiful," he said. "Makes me want to wake up early and watch the sun with you at the shore." Her heart fluttered. Though he'd been traveling back and forth between Atlanta and Charleston, each visit cemented the deepening bond they shared. "You're serious about that?" she teased. "You, a busy CEO, waking up at the crack of dawn." He flashed a playful smile. "For the right reason, absolutely." Then his expression softened. "I'm proud of you, Melody. Seeing you put this exhibit together, helping these kids, showing your own work. It's all so genuine and uplifting." She leaned into him, letting his words soak in. "I feel like I've come so far from that woman who was afraid of everyone's judgment, and you've been there, quietly reminding me that I can stand on my own." Ryan gently squeezed her side. "You're doing the same for me, you know. I was pretty cynical after my divorce, but you made me realize that vulnerability is worth the risk." Their moment was interrupted by Dr. Bennett, who clapped a hand on Melody's shoulder. "Mind if I steal you for a second?" he asked. "There are a few local reporters here wanting a quick word on the photography program. We'd love a short interview, if you're up for it." Melody's stomach tightened, recalling the uncomfortable confrontations with intrusive journalists. But she saw the friendly faces across the cafe, people who genuinely supported her cause. Taking a breath, she nodded. "Sure. Let's do it." She walked over to meet two reporters, neither of whom she recognized as the antagonistic Larry Moore, and answered their questions about occupational therapy, children's empowerment, and how photography bridged the gap between healing and creativity. They asked politely about her personal journey, but she skillfully pivoted the conversation back to the children's achievements. By the end, they seemed charmed by her enthusiasm rather than fixated on old scandals. As they moved on to gather quotes from Dr. Bennett, Melody let out a soft sigh of relief. She turned back to Ryan, who offered a nod of encouragement from across the room. For the first time, she felt fully capable of sharing her journey without fear or shame. Her exhibit wasn't just a gallery of images, it was a declaration of how she'd transformed pain into purpose. Stepping to one side, she noticed a stack of blank postcards on a nearby table. She picked one up and wrote a simple phrase, "Thank you for believing in me." With a smile, she tucked it into her pocket, intending to give it to Ryan when the crowd thinned, another small token of gratitude for the man who helped remind her that life could be rebuilt from shattered plans into something entirely new and luminous. Several months later, Melody found herself once again in the brightly painted therapy room at MUSC Sean Jenkins Children's Hospital, leading a bustling group of young patients through a photography session. Today was the last day of the pilot program, and she could hardly believe how much it had grown. 4 times as many children participated compared to the initial group, and nearly all of them experienced measurable improvements in fine motor coordination, not to mention boosts in self-esteem. A little girl named Rosie handed Melody her camera with a triumphant grin. "Miss Melody, I got a picture of me tying my shoelaces." "That's awesome," Melody exclaimed, returning Rosie's smile. "We'll print that one." "Maybe we'll put it on the board under big achievements." Rosie skipped away, her day undoubtedly brightened by the recognition. Melody felt a pang of wistful pride, realizing how many of these kids had discovered new ways to express themselves. She began cleaning up, humming to herself, until she sensed someone standing in the doorway. Turning, she saw Dr. Bennett, arms folded, grinning broadly. "We got the official go-ahead," he said without preamble. "The hospital administration wants to continue and expand the photography therapy program. You'll receive a small budget for cameras, printing, and even an assistant if needed." Melody's jaw dropped. "Seriously, that's incredible." He nodded. "Your dedication and the results made this an easy decision. Congrats." She nearly jumped with excitement, but held it in out of respect for the professional environment. Still, she couldn't stop grinning as Dr. Bennett headed off, leaving her with an uncontainable surge of accomplishment. Expand, she thought, mentally listing new ideas, online galleries, collaborative projects with other departments, maybe even a tie-in with Ryan's tech connections for a digital platform. Feeling exhilarated, Melody quickly wrapped up her workday. She texted both Chloe and Ryan about the news. Chloe replied with emojis of celebration, while Ryan called, his voice brimming with pride. "I'm in Charleston today," he added. "Meet me at your place later. We can celebrate properly." Her pulse quickened at the warmth in his tone. "Absolutely," she answered. "I'll be home by 6. That evening, the fading sun painted the Charleston sky with streaks of pink and orange. Melody arrived at her condo to find Ryan already there, carrying a takeout bag from her favorite bistro. He spread out containers of shrimp and grits, fresh salad, and homemade rolls on her small dining table. "Congratulations, Ms. Visionary," he teased, pulling her into a soft kiss. "I knew you'd make this program a success." She returned the kiss, heart fluttering at how natural their bond felt. As they sat down to eat, conversation flowed effortlessly. Ryan updated her on his company's new Charleston-based projects, which meant he'd be spending even more time in the city. They discussed the logistics of balancing their busy schedules, determined to keep communication open and supportive. After dinner, they settled on her sofa, the overhead lights dimmed while a gentle lamp glowed in the corner. Melody noticed Ryan seemed pensive, his arms snug around her shoulders. Finally, he looked down at her. "You know," he said, voice low, "I've been thinking about what this all means for us. I've never wanted to rush you, but I also want you to know I'm here for the long haul, if you'll have me." Her heart thumped. She thought of the day Mark vanished, the crushing shame in that church, the months of rebuilding her life piece by piece. Now here she was, comfortable with a man who truly saw her, her strengths, her aspirations, her flaws, and stood by her regardless. She nestled closer, resting her head on his chest. "I want that too," she whispered. "No illusions, no forced roles, just growing together and seeing where it takes us." His chest rose in a grateful sigh, and he pressed a tender kiss to her temple. They lingered there, wrapped in a quiet contentment that spoke more than words could convey. Outside, the night settled over Charleston, the city lights twinkling along the harbor. Melody imagined the uncharted horizons ahead, the expanding therapy program, deeper ties to Ryan, a future shaped by her own choices. Eventually, she reached for the camera resting on a side table. A playful idea struck her. "Hey," she said, lifting it with a grin, "let's capture this moment." Ryan broke into an amused smile. "A selfie with the wonderful Ms. Wood, unstoppable photographer and therapist extraordinaire?" "I'd be honored." They snuggled together, and Melody clicked the shutter, preserving a flash of happiness that once seemed unreachable. As she reviewed the image, a sense of peace enveloped her. The path had been fraught with heartache, doubt, and intense self-discovery, but now she was here, embracing the life she'd chosen, guided by love, purpose, and open horizons. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.